Fur friendship. Corrupted manifestation of totemism. First off, when I talk about furries, I mean any person with an elevated allure to anthropomorphism, whether that person wants to identify as a furry or not. Now, prepare for some high-quality schizo-autism. Last week, I made a thread to see what X had to say about furries and how they come to be. My proposal was that there's a more esoteric explanation for their existence. The thread ended up getting a few dozen replies, so it wasn't a huge success by any means. But I was surprised to see that many Anons had the same idea as I did. That furry's origin was not as simple as we've learned to believe. It doesn't always begin with some lonely weirdo consuming cartoons, and then slowly wanting to fuck Disney's Robin Hood. The reason why I'm so obsessed with this stuff is simply that I'm a furry myself. Think of that what you want. However, unlike many other fur friends, I was never obsessed with anthro shows as a kid, and I wasn't a terminally online recluse in my preteen years, the time when most people became sexual degenerates. How I exactly became a furry, I don't exactly know, but I do remember being around the age of 16. It almost feels like one day, I had no idea what a furry even was. Then, something clicked inside of me, and the very next day, I was going through the rabbit hole of fursuits, YIF, roleplay, and all the other manifestations of furry subculture, with morbid curiosity and unexplainable fervor. Not once did I stop and question my actions. I very quickly went full circle from slightly interested in funny cartoon animals to has jacked off to R34 and has a fursona. The mysterious origins of my fur friendship eventually led me to consider various esoteric theories for the furry phenomenon. My research took what I believe was a natural turn after I stumbled upon the old shamanistic traditions of Native Americans and Siberians, which included Totemism. Encyclopedia Britannica defines totemism as a quote-unquote system of belief in which humans are said to have kinship or a mystical relationship with a spirit being, such as an animal or plant. The entity, or totem, is thought to interact with a given kin group or an individual and to serve as their emblem or symbol. Furthermore, it is necessary to differentiate individual totemism from totemism in general, as it will be important to my theory. Individual totemism is expressed as, quote-unquote, an intimate relationship of friendship and protection between a person and a particular animal or a natural object, sometimes between a person and a species of animal. Frequently connected with individual totemism are definite ideas about the human soul or souls, and conceptions derived from them, such as the idea of an alter ego and negualism, which means that a kind of simultaneous existence is assumed between an animal or a natural object and a person. After learning about this, I now strongly believe that some people become furries when the ancestral memory of totemism slumbering in their subconscious is either triggered by something to the conscious, or more seldom, when it enters the conscious naturally. Once the memory of totemism enters the conscience, the person becomes linked with a certain animal totem and or their realm. However, it is necessary to understand that this link is imperfect. The person, the new furry, is unable to make a proper connection with the totems, and he only receives corrupted influence from them. This corrupted influence often manifests into a sexual and romantic interest in anthropomorphic animals, among other things. Not all furries are the same. Some of them have a stronger connection to the totem world, some weaker. I believe that furries who have made fursonas have it stronger. Next, I will briefly discuss in detail what a fursona even is. One of the most common misconceptions that normies have about fur friends is that creating a fursona is a prerequisite to becoming a furry. This is not the case. Some furries are into anthropomorphism simply because it's an aesthetic or a fetish, nothing more. However, many do have one or even multiple fursonas. I divide fursonas into two varieties. Type A, self-fursona, This type of fursona is a furry version of a person. The animal in question may look similar to its creator, and even more often, share the same personality with him. Might be an idealized version of its maker. This type is more common among Western fur friends, and is a quote-unquote pure fursona, the person themselves imagined as an anthropomorphic animal. And type B, representative fursona. This type of fursona is more clearly distinguished from its creator. It usually bears no resemblance with its creator's physical appearance, and similarities with its maker's personality are often harder to point out. It is more like a virtual companion of the person, for the lack of a better word, rather than a pure fursona. Note already the similarity with the description of an individual totem. This type is common among both Western and Eastern fur friends, and makes up the majority of fursonas in the latter's case. It must be noted that, even for those who have a type A fursona, it is rare for the average fur friend to actually consider their fursona to be their true self. In fact, I wouldn't consider a person like that a mere furry. Let me explain why. Last week in my thread, someone posted a link to a rather interesting blog, where a theory similar to mine is presented, although through the lens of evolutionary biology, rather than a spiritual realm of totem animals. The author makes an argument that our bodies don't necessarily match the sensorometer portions of our brains, and other information content about what our bodies are supposed to be like. I interpreted this as them saying that furries happen when older subconscious memories and old DNA data of being another type of animal are in conflict with our current human form. For anyone who wants to read the blog, here's the link. However, after reading the whole blog through, it became clear that the writer has the same false assumption about furries as many others. That they are people who don't feel like they're humans, that they feel more like an animal trapped in a human body. Thus, the author implies that furries have dysmorphia, their theory arguably influenced by their identity as transgender. Furthermore, the author assumes that all furries have a type A fursona, and their theory described as an anthropomorphic projection of a person's self-concept, including sensorometer body map, visual modules, and social modules, all into a 3D form. I disagree with this fundamentally, as you will soon see. All in all, what the author of the blog is essentially describing are people called otherkin, and, as I already wrote in the last post, the vast majority of furries don't think their fursona is their true self. A fur friend is not an otherkin. The author's theory, in my opinion, doesn't give us the correct explanation for the existence of the furries and fursonas. I will not proceed to hypothesize the connection between totemism and both types of fursonas. As established, some people can become connected to the totem realm. However, when the connection is made, it's virtually always imperfect and doesn't form a proper bond between a person and his totem. The influence of an individual totem is clear in Type B fursona, as I described earlier. The totem's intimate relationship of friendship and protection between the totem and the person somewhat resembles Type B fursona, as a person's virtual companion. Thus, I believe that the Type B fursona is a superficial image based on his totem. The fursona will share some common characteristics with it, such as its species, but is often perverted to be more sexualized and appealing to furries as large. The special status of one's totem is reduced to that of a mascot, a mere tool for either attaining a sense of fellowship among the furry community or marketing one's artistic services for monetary gain. Type A fursona is even more warped image of one's totems. As it is not a separate entity from its creator, it's almost like an anthropomorphic chimera. It is a result of the person's own sense of self getting mixed up with the totem. The reason for this is beyond me, but I speculate that a person with weak self-esteem is more prone to unconsciously adopting the image of the totem as a part of his own persona. It might sound amusing, but fursona creation is actually the closest a furry will ever get to practicing authentic totemism. And that's saying a lot. After all, There are no such things as pink huskies, coyotes with LED lit fur, or animal hybrids that furry artists have created over the years. Many of these eye-soaring fursonas are created just for the sake of authenticity, and some even make them just to get into the community. Ironically, even the most authentic aspect of fur friendship is but a cheap imitation of the real spiritual tradition. Fur friendship is, essentially, a corrupted manifestation of totemism. Before I move on to the second segment of the thread, I'm going to answer a few questions about fursonas and totems that many of you may have. Why are most fursonas the same few species? I think there might be many reasons why wolves, foxes, cats, and other canines and felines are among the most popular species. Perhaps most totems have a canine form due to humankind's long fellowship with the dog, or perhaps canine totems preceded the domestication of animals, and that's why we even domesticate dogs in the first place, and not say mustelids. However, the more plausible explanation is probably just bandwagoning certain species. Are furries without fursonas also linked to the totem realm? Yes, but their connection is weaker. What's your fursona, fur friend? I have a type B fursona. It's a badger. I have the misfortune of being a fur friend as well. What should I think of all of this and my own fursona? In my view, the two possibilities you have are either to cut your link to the totem realm, extremely difficult, if not impossible for some to do, or to become so connected with it that you ascend for friendship and begin practicing real authentic totemism. The first steps would be to stop sexualizing the species you feel particular closeness with, and then stop consuming anthropomorphic erotica or anything that's not sacred for the totem realm. Make the totem something you actually venerate. But don't feel bad if you indulge in your bad habits at first. Even I'm taking my first steps. Too much guilt is no good. Now for the second and the last segment. I'll be speculating why fur friendship, as a large, is a very recent phenomenon. Surely, it would be too conventional for people to now become reconnected with the totem realm, with all of these anthropomorphic media around. So my theory has to be false, right? While it is true that the furry fandom itself is a product of modern times, I doubt that the potential link between humanity and the totem realm ever went anywhere. In fact, the influence of totemism can be seen in fables and national symbols, among other things, even after the transition from shamanism and nomadism to a more settled lifestyle. Whether this transition was positive or not, I'll leave to your own consideration. But even after larger state religions cast away most of the remaining practices of shamanistic totemism in favor of a more anthropocentric spirituality in many parts of the world, the totems didn't perish, they just gave way. Between the times of majority shamanistic societies and the 20th century, the potential to become connected with the totem realm still endured. However, unlike today, it was rarer and happened without a trigger. Some people become linked naturally to their respective totems, and some people still do. Nevertheless, the early 20th century gave birth to the animation industry, which I really think is the main catalyst for reconnecting so many people with the totem realm. As I said earlier, the ancestral memory of totemism usually enters the consciousness after being triggered by something. Would there even be a better trigger than an animation about anthropomorphic critters? After all, images have great power over people. It is no wonder why iconoclasm exists. Animation is the biggest maker of furries today, undoubtedly. The obvious follow-up question would be whether animators and animation studios apply anthropomorphism to their work without any ulterior motives, or whether there's something bigger going on behind our backs. I'm not sure about this myself, but sometimes I feel like they want to intentionally confuse people. Consider Brother Bear, a 2003 movie literally about totemism, where a Native American man turns into a bear. It feels very on the nose. However, the most explicit example of an animation movie that was clearly made by people aware of just how much you can influence people's minds with anthropomorphism is Disney's Zootopia from 2016. If I recall correctly, It is the first Walt Disney animation picture that features exclusively anthropomorphic animals since The Lion King from 1995. The animals clearly representing old animal archetypes before being subverted a la postmodern style. They live in a world that parallels our own. All the political subtext in the film aside, what really struck me as I saw the film for the first time was how sexualized it was, with jokes about rabbit libido and muscular tiger dancers, among other things. I can't accentuate Zootopia's influence enough. The Zootopia tag on e621.net, the biggest furry porn archive, has 42,000 results. Children who were 10 when they saw the movie would now be 15. The number of furries this movie has created must be massive. If we are to believe that making people furries is, in some way, deliberate, it makes me wonder why. Some of you might have answers, which I'd be glad to hear. At this point, the only explanation I can come up with is that the elites like having people confused and pervert their identities in any way possible. TLDR. Fur friendship is a corrupted and confused manifestation of totemism, most clearly seen in fursona creation. I know some of my points are vague, especially with the second segment. If you want to add something to my theory because you think I might be missing something, or you think I have an imperfect understanding of certain things, be my guest. You can also present your alternative theories. I'd be glad to hear them. Kill yourself, fur friend, and seek Jesus comments are also welcome.